Thanks for downloading another segment from the Best of the Classic Metal Show. The Classic Metal Show is heard live on Saturdays from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Eastern, exclusively at www.theclassicmetalshow.com. And now here's another piece of Classic Metal Show history on the Best of the Classic Metal Show.
The Classic Metal Show.
That's Slayer right here on the Classic Metal Show from their Still Raining release, and that, of course, is Raining Blood. And, of course, Chris, I know that you enjoyed that, right?
I did. You know me, man. Anything Slayer, always good.
Anything brutal, we enjoy it. But
that's right.
Speaking of brutal, another book about Slayer has come out, which you and I were talking off air. How odd is it that this one band is the subject of several books already?
Well, it's kind of a big statement to just how important they've been through the history of metal, I guess.
Evidently. Well, of course, we've had our good friend Eric Braverman on the show, who wrote a book on Slayer, and of course your friend DX Ferris, who wrote a book on Slayer. Well, now we'd like to welcome to the Classic Metal Show another author who wrote a book on Slayer, Joel McIver. He wrote a book called The Bloody Reign of Slayer. And Joel is calling from England, I believe. Right, Joel?
Yes. Hello there. Yeah, I am the last of the unholy trinity of Slayer authors, by the sound of it.
Well, Joel, to be honest with you, I don't know if you know who Eric Braverman is, but he encourages...
I don't know Eric, but I do know Dave Ferris, because he was in touch with me a couple of times about his book.
Oh, cool.
Excellent. Well, Eric has encouraged all of us to write a book on Slayer.
Yeah.
So, anyway...
Well, how many can the market stand? That's the thing, before it becomes saturated and everybody gets sick of it, you know. That's the thing.
It's Slayer, Joel. Could anybody ever get sick of it?
There's no such thing as too much Slayer music, but perhaps there's such a thing as too many Slayer books, you know what I mean?
Sure, well, let's hope that it doesn't end right before yours sells a bunch. How's that?
Well, it already has sold a bunch, fortunately, but the reason for that, I think, is certainly that Dave's Rain and Blood book is a very good book, and it's an analysis of just that one album and its impact and its making, whereas mine is the full biography. So they're two different books, although they ostensibly deal with Slayer. I haven't seen Eric's book. What's that like?
You've probably seen it. It's the book that came with the Seasons of the Apocalypse box set.
Soundtrack to the Apocalypse, yeah?
Yeah, soundtrack. What I say? Seasons?
Oh, yeah. What, like the booklet inside that?
Yeah, he wrote the book in the box set.
You mean back in 1991, right?
Yeah.
No, wait, that was 2000. No, I'm thinking of Decade of Aggression. Yeah, in 2003, with all those pictures by my good friend Kevin Estrada, of course.
Oh, there you go. See?
So we're talking 2.5 books, really, not really 3.
Right. Well, Joel, I have to tell you...
a little bit off, because it's quite late here.
Sure. Well, Joel, I have to tell you, man, that I received the book recently, the Bloody Reign of Slayer, and I have to tell you, this is by far the most impressive of the 3 books. You talk about a thorough book, man. How long did it take you to write this thing?
Oh, man, I was doing the research for years, basically. The Bloody Reign of Slayer is my 11th book, yeah? And all through the previous 10 years of writing books and being a journalist for a bunch of magazines, I spent a lot of time interviewing musicians and asking them questions about Slayer, and I kind of amassed all that stuff. So when the time came and I got a deal with Omnibus Press, who are this giant music book publisher, to do a book, I had a lot of it ready, so I guess I spent about another 6 months getting the material ready, and then I just wrote the fucker in about 3 months, solidly, last year. And I tell you what, as well, I went back and forward with Slayer's manager for about 6 or 8 months trying to make it the official Slayer book, yeah?
Right.
And they were interested, too. We had some interesting conversations, but I had a deadline to hit. Like I say, I had about 8 months to write it when we started talking about it. And they were busy. They were touring with Marilyn Manson. They were doing stuff. And they're nice guys and a good band, but decision making isn't too quick inside that organization. And in the end, we ran out of time. So I walked away and said, thanks guys, but I haven't got time to to wait around for you. It was entirely amicable, I should say. It was fantastic, and I hope they write their own book, and I, for one, will look forward to it. But yeah, until then, I think mine is the best possible alternative.
Sure. Well, the one thing that I'm really digging about your book from leafing through, and like I said, I have not read the whole thing yet, but the one thing that I found most interesting and impressive is, unlike any other book, basically about any other band that I've ever read, not just Slayer, but I like the way that you didn't only focus everything on Slayer. And what I mean is, I like in some of the chapters where you talked and got some information about the other bands that were on tour with Slayer, whether it was like the one that sticks out in my mind was when you were talking with Rob Flynn of Machine Head, and he was talking about all the injuries that he got from being on tour with Slayer. And I mean, it's interesting to hear these guys that are out there with a band that is so intense live, and has such an intense following. It's interesting to hear what goes on for anybody that has to open for these guys.
Well, I'm glad that you like that part, because I made a real effort to try and place Slayer in the context, on the metal scene, to show how they interact with the bands that they tour with and who their contemporaries are. And I tried to do that all the way from their roots, back when they were on Metal Blade with Brian Slagle, all the way through until the later years with the major labels. So good. I'm glad that bit resonated, man. You're obviously a man of great taste.
Sure. Well, the other thing that I do find very interesting as well is the fact that you broke this thing down by. The chapters are broken down not only by like the album, but also seemingly the touring of that period as well. What possessed you to write it in that sort of a fashion?
Possessed. What possessed me was the band. They're interesting, this band, and they will tell you, and I'm sure they have told you, that they like their time off. They don't really like to work that much. They like to take it easy and kick back with their families for quite extended periods of time between albums. So what that means is that if you look at Slayer's career, it's made up of these kind of discrete periods of frenzied activity, and then a nice big break, and then a big period of activity. So it made sense to kind of structure the book in that way, to look at all the crazy shit that happened around each album, and then there was a little kind of lull where they took it easy, and then back onto the tour treadmill again. So that was why I did it, really. It just seemed to make sense that way, but I could have done it another way as well. I could have just done it year by year, as I've done in some of my other books. But no, that was the idea. I want to try and make it clear that you don't just put an album out. You have to write it, you have to record it, you have to tour it, promote it, and all that is one big chunk of activity. And I guess each of those make up a chapter.
Sure. Now it's interesting too that it's not like most books where the most recent stuff gets the most amount of pages. You know what I mean? That's kind of a trend. It's what I remember, so it's what I'll write. You have a very extensive chapter of pre-Fame, pre-83 of them. Where did you find this information from?
Oh, well, if you're an author, and I'm over here in merry England, I'm nowhere near California, so what you have to do in that situation is find people who were there, who were on the ground at the time. And much as I would love to have been living in Orange County in 1982, so I could get first-hand information about Slayer, I wasn't. So the way you deliver value to the reader, to the guy who's been generous enough to lay out $30 for your book, is to find people who were there. So in this case, I spoke to a bunch of musicians who witnessed Slayer's early years, and then the industry guys, and specifically that's Bill Matoya, who engineers Slayer's early stuff, Brian Slagle, who founded Metal Blade, a DJ called Bob Nalbandian, who works at Shockwaves now, who ran a fanzine back then called Headbanger in LA, Gene Hoglan, of course, right? Who was a friend of the band's in the early days, and then anybody else you can track down who was in a band. I spoke to the Testament guys, I spoke to the Dark Angel, the Possessed, even the Death Angel, anybody who was in LA, who was in San Francisco in the very early 80s. That's where that information came from, man, straight from the source.
Very cool, Joel. Well, Bob Nalbandian of Shockwaves, he's a huge fan of the Classic Metal Show. In fact, we just had him on the show a couple of weeks ago. And,
cool, man. He's great. The great Bob Nalbandian.
And Chris was one of his guest hosts on one of his latest releases of Shockwave. Here,
one of those podcasts.
Yeah, his Skull Session. Yeah, his Skull Session.
It's guys like him and guys like you that keep the American metal scene flowing.
Sure. Well, I got to ask you, Joel, the obvious question here is, what is your interest in Slayer? I mean, when the outsider looking in, people who look at quote-unquote metal fans, they all think that metal fans are either devil worshippers or drugged out, boozed up guys who, live in their parents' basement and, have nothing to live for. Obviously, you're a well-spoken, educated individual. What's your interest in
impeccable taste and style?
Right. What is your interest in Slayer? How did you get interested in the band enough to want to write a book?
Oh, man. I mean, no different from anybody else. And in fact, I think what that demonstrates is that music that has incredible energy and aggression and power appeals to everybody, right across the board. I live a really sedate life, man. I don't really look like a metaler. I don't do anything that's particularly extreme. I'm a dad with 2 small children. But to me, Slayer are just like one of the ultimate musical phenomena. They're just so powerful, so aggressive, and so violent that you cannot help but be moved by this music. And that's the same whether you're a 16-year-old, what you said, you're someone stuffed full of drugs in a bunker somewhere, or if you're a respectable family dude, as I like to think of myself. Their appeal is universal, man.
Well, that is true. I mean, we did mention our good friend Eric Braverman, and he says that for some reason Slayer is acceptable across the board to, say, people who like pop or even country or goth or whatever. It's just like, I don't like heavy metal, but somehow Slayer is cool. And he says he could be spelunking in the caves of Africa and find the word Slayer scrawled across the stone inside a cave somewhere, Yeah,
I bet you that's the first time the word spelunking has appeared in a sentence with Slayer either on live radio.
But somehow, as you said, Joel, Slayer has gotten a worldwide appeal, and they're like the most infamous of what you want to consider heavy metal or thrash bands. Yeah,
I think so. I think, they're of the big 4 of thrash, they've always been the heaviest, they've always been the fastest. They weren't anywhere near the most successful, of course, and they weren't as kind of amusing like Anthrax. But what a commitment that band had. I tell you, what you might notice if you read my book in more detail is that I'm not 100% totally fawning and completely giving praise to every single thing they've done. Where they've made a mistake, and I think they've made a few, or recorded a song that was substandard, I have said so in no uncertain terms. And an example would be the Diabolos in Musica album from '98, which I thought was it was a complete fuck up. Kerry had enough of the industry. He walked away for a little while. He told me this just the other day when he was here in London doing some press. He couldn't stand the state of contemporary music at the time, so Jeff did all the writing. I don't really know why, but because Jeff has this hardcore punk background, but he ended up writing a bunch of songs that were as close to nu metal as Slayer have ever come. And I think that album, by and large, wasn't as successful as the earlier stuff. So I said that in probably quite, language that might piss some people off. I've done that in a few of my books. I wrote a book in 2004 called Justice for All, The Truth About Metallica, which is the book that I'm best known for. And that book has gone on to sell 30,000 copies and in 9 languages, and it was a big success. But I've had an awful lot of hate mail from people who read that book because I really laid into Metallica extremely hard about some of their stuff. And I did to a lesser degree in the Slayer book as well, which I think is a fresh approach. It's not just completely all about this band is great, this band is fantastic. I've tried to be quite honest about my negative opinions as well.
Well, Joel, it's very interesting to me, and I want your take on this, that Slayer, obviously kind of had a reputation of being a very rebellious band, breaking all the rules, They don't give a shit about anybody or anything. They're going to do what they want. But strangely enough, when it comes to interviewing them or trying to get close to them, they're very guarded, and they have their management, which obviously you've dealt with, that seems to protect them. And Chris can tell you from personal experience. About a year ago, he was asked to do an
online interview. You might have seen it, Joel. They did a concert for that Yibo TV with Marilyn Manson.
Yeah, I remember it.
And I did all the interviews for him.
Yeah, and
cool.
Chris,
I used to see that stuff come up on Blabbermouth all the time.
And
right.
And Chris, Chris asked some very pointed, I don't know if they would so much be considered controversial questions. But of course, in the final edit, most of that stuff was cut out.
Yeah. They definitely guard their private lives quite carefully.
No, it wasn't their private lives either. It was professional stuff. It was stuff like I asked Tom if they had considered kicking Kerry out of the band when he went and tried out for Megadeth, and stuff like that. I mean, it was business, but it was.
They don't like it. You know the famous story. Where Tom pissed on Kronos' face?
No.
You must have heard that story, man. It's famous.
I haven't heard that one.
It's in my book, but I can't claim that I dug it up for the first time. You can check it out anywhere. All right, so Venom and Slayer were on tour together in '84.
Okay.
And they were on the same tour bus. I can't believe you haven't heard this story before. And they were all pretty drunk. And Kronos of Venom was sitting in the lounge on the bus, and Tom came staggering in, drunk off his face, and said, "Where's the bathroom in this thing?" And for a joke, Kronos said, "Right here on my face." And Tom was obviously completely drunk off his face, got his cock out and pissed on Kronos' face. Dude, I wish I'd seen that, right?
Oh, man.
Kronos jumps up, and Kronos is a bodybuilder.
Right.
From a very, very, very rough part of England, Newcastle, rough city, very full of very tough people, and he decked Tom pretty badly. So if you look at that show at Studio 54, right, in New York,
right?
Tom's got a big black eye. I think you guys call it a raspberry or a blackberry or something. What is it? You know when you have a big bruise on your face.
Yeah, we just call it a black eye.
He pissed on Kronos. So, and just the other day, I asked him about that in an interview, and he just won't talk about it now. He doesn't like to bring it up because he's very embarrassed about it. To his credit,
Sure.
He thinks it was a pretty low thing to do, and that's the kind of thing that they won't talk about, man.
Right.
Sure. I got to interview a guy called Doug Goodman in the book, who was Slayer's first tour manager, and he was actually there, standing next to Kronos when Tom unleashed on him.
Talk about rain and blood.
Man. You only hear it here on the Classic Metal Show.
There it is. Well, Joel, one thing that I did find really interesting from leafing through the book, and like I said, I'm going to preface this again by saying I have not read it word page by page yet to really soak it in.
I can forgive you for that.
I find it interesting that you that the way that you kind of look at the various bands that have been with Slayer on tour, and I'm curious where you think some of those bands rank, as far as being able to hang with a band like Slayer. And specifically, I'm talking about like a band like Sepultura or Chimera or Machine Head. It seems like all three of them at one time were claimed as almost like Slayer was passing the torch to them, and it never seemed to happen with any of them. I'm curious what your take is on that.
I think I agree with you. I mean, those bands looked at one point as if they could perhaps step up and take over from the big four of thrash, because in the mid '90s, thrash metal was dead. Metallica, Anthrax, and Megadeth were all playing other kinds of music. Slayer were kind of just about doing it, but in '94, '95, we hadn't had the bands like The Haunted yet. You had the odd little thrash song from Sepultura, from Machine Head, from Pantera, but they weren't really thrash metal bands. So yeah, at that point, it looked like maybe Slayer would hand the torch on to those guys. Never really happened though. Luckily, they came back, and extreme music has resurged, as we know, in the last decade. Thank God. I mean, I like those bands, I do, but thrash metal's where it's at.
Right, sure. What do you now? I'm gonna jump off topic because I know this for a fact. I understand you interviewed Mr. Ulrich from Metallica today. What did Lars have to say that you want to share?
Oh man, loads. I mean, he had tons of interesting things to say. For starters, quite a lot of the interview was for a drummers magazine called Rhythm over here, so it was technical gear stuff.
Okay.
I had a sneak preview of 6 of the songs from the new album Death Magnetic, and his drumming's great. You know, it's all over it. It's a great sound. He hasn't got that horrible, shitty garbage can sound that he had on St. Anger. So we talked about drums quite a lot, and then I had a couple of rumors to clear up, and those will be going onto a website called The Quietus quite soon, so I won't let it all come out. But there was one, I asked him a bit about his consumption of cocaine, and he talked quite candidly about that, actually, and so for that, have a look at The Quietus next week. I should think that'll be out. That's an interesting little thing.
Sure.
But, you know, Lars is pretty good at, he'll talk about anything you want, really, these days.
There's not much you can do to hurt this guy anymore, is there?
Nah, he's a pretty confident dude. Unlike Kirk, funny enough. I interviewed Kirk this weekend at the Reading Festival, which is this major festival we have here, and he told me that he really had trouble with his self-confidence recording the solos on this new album. It's never easy for him, you know. Either the solos come really easily and he thinks, wait, that came too easily, it can't be right, or they don't come easily and he kind of agonizes over them and struggles over them. And that was interesting to me because you'd think after 25, 28 years, 26 years, whatever it is, you know, Kirk, one of the finest lead guitarists in the world, would be absolutely full of self-confidence, but he is not, you know. He just isn't. And I did James as well yesterday. It's Metallica Fever around here, and James is the same as he always is, you know. He's the kind of the reserved kind of dude who doesn't say an awful lot. But you know, what he says has an awful lot of weight. You know, you've got to respect a guy like that.
Sure. Do any of these guys, when you interview them, and I know you've written several books. I mean, I think you're at what, 10 or 11 or something like that.
Yeah, up there, yeah.
Do any of these guys, when you interview them now, like specifically Metallica, who you wrote some harsh stuff about, do they give you shit about it? Do they come back at you and say, hey, dude, you know, that was wrong?
No, not so far. Lars said today, hey, you the guy that wrote the fucking book about us? And I said, yeah, that's me. And he said that he constantly has to sign copies of it all over the place. But he hasn't read it, which is absolutely what I would expect. You know, why would you? But I think they probably had their legal team check it through for libel, but no cases of libel have come my way yet, so obviously it was all right. No, I've never had any problems. I gave a copy of the Slayer book to Kerry a couple of months ago when I saw him. He liked it, but you know, I really don't think these guys are going to sit down and read the story about themselves. You know, God, that would be quite hard to do, I think, don't you?
Sure. Well, Joel, you obviously wrote the book on Slayer, The Bloody Reign of Slayer, and where can people find this thing?
Oh, it's on Amazon.com if you're in the US of A. Everywhere else in the world, it's in your local Amazon and in major bookstores, well, in all bookstores actually, because it's a massive publisher with serious distribution muscle, which is a great position to be in. I'm very fortunate. So anyway, really.
Well, sure. I mean, after writing or penning 11 books, I would think that finally your credibility level would be to the point to where you could get a good publisher out there who could get your works out there. So,
well, you'd be surprised, man. You'd be surprised because I'm not writing about mainstream subjects here, you know. So it's quite difficult to persuade a publisher that's of a decent size that, for example, Slayer is a commercial proposition, you know. And in fact, I had to really sell the idea of the Metallica book to that publisher, and it really, really paid off because it was their bestseller for that whole year. So yeah, it does help that I've written a bunch of books and that some of them have been successful. But you know, it's never that easy. The books market is conservative. People, you know, publishers are all about making their money back these days, and I guess I'm lucky, you know. I've had some luck there, but there are an awful lot of writers, very, very good writers, and colleagues of mine who write books for very small kind of backroom publishers because the larger publishers can't be persuaded of the value of writing about something that is perceived as a niche subject. So it's a tough old game, as we say over here in Cockney, England.
Sure. Well, Joel, being that you do have an interest in metal and hard melodic rock, as it were, things are very cyclical when it comes to music and fashion and whatever it might be. Do you see a more interest in traditional style or classic metal now than you have, say, in the last 10 or 15 years?
I absolutely do, yeah. I do a lot of writing for Metal Hammer magazine, and the amount of power metal and just traditional heavy metal that is coming out of Europe certainly is vastly increased from the last few years. Lots of dueling Thin Lizzy style guitar harmonies, lots of not extreme riffs, just kind of mainstream stuff. It's quite gratifying, really. It's a very, very healthy time for heavy metal at the moment. Helped along by guys such as you and your show.
Sure. And since you said that you did get a little preview of at least 6 tracks of the Metallica, what's your early thoughts on it?
My thoughts are that the album is average. I think it's the best album they've done since the Black Album in '91, but it doesn't in any way match up to their '80s stuff.
Sure.
And, it's fine, it's kind of solid. It's all right, but I can't say that it's a great album. That's just my opinion.
Well,
You're killing me, man.
We've been having this debate on the show as each song is being released, and that's my take on it too, just from the little bit that I've heard already. So,
did you hear the one that came out today?
Yes,
Apocalypse?
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sorry, last week.
Yeah.
There's some Thrash vibes there, but why listen to that when you can listen to Master of Puppets?
Right.
But it's good to hear Kirk shredding. It's good to hear some ideas in the music. But the thing to do is to go and see Metallica live because they own every other band there. Maybe we shouldn't get too obsessed by their records anymore.
Sure.
It's a live band now.
Well, you almost sound like you listened to last week's classic metal show because that was almost exactly what I said.
There you go.
So, all right. Well,
do you think the listeners agree with your conclusion?
It was a good debate. It was a good debate, and we'll probably have more tonight on the show. So. Oh,
endlessly controversial Metallica. You got to love them for that.
Absolutely. All right, Joel. Well, the author Joel McIver of The Bloody Reign of Slayer. Go over to Amazon. Go pick up the book, and you got a website or anything, Joel?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, it's www.joelmciver, that's JoelMciver.co.uk. Head over there. My door is always open. Fire me an email. Come and see my books, and I'll be there as long as people want me to keep on writing the stuff.
Sure. All right. Very cool. We'll drop Joel a line and let him know you heard him here on the Classic Metal Show, and by all means, go pick up his new book. All right, is that all you got for the fans tonight, Joel? Anything we missed that you want to tell us about?
Well, not really. I mean, I think, we have a great community here in all countries, and the fact that metal is so healthy right now is just down to the fans, it's down to the media, it's down to people like you, it's down to people like me. It's a very, very healthy sort of situation that we're all in, and I celebrate it, frankly, and I think that everybody else should too, and that's about all I got to say. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, Joel, before we let you go, we're going to ask you the traditional Classic Metal Show question. We've been asking various guests and artists for the last 4 years this same question, and we always get good answers. How has Lemmy from Motorhead influenced your career?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, when I was a rookie journalist 10 years ago or 15 years ago, he was one of my very first interviewees. But first of all, I noticed that he had obviously done 5,000 interviews that week or whatever, and he was absolutely fresh with his answers. He was interested, he was challenging and all that stuff. So that showed that you can be a rock star and you can be a good person with integrity who's intelligent and has a lot to say. And then in that same interview, the guy invited me into his hotel room, funny enough, to hear a demo he had made at the time of some old rock and roll tunes. And I just thought, well, this is a guy who is absolutely unique. He's got millions of different interests. He's prepared to step out of his comfort zone and do stuff that other rock stars wouldn't do. And it kind of opened my eyes quite a lot. So that as I have worked as a writer over subsequent years, I've learned to value people like that, and people who are prepared to go the extra mile and be a bit different. And Lemmy, I tell you, there's no one like him. And when he's gone, there'll be a big hole there that we can't fill.
I agree with that. All right, Joel, well, we appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk to us here on the Classic Metal Show. And as a tradition, we always let the guests choose a closing song and maybe tell us a story about it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think I would like you to play. Can I choose anything I want?
Sure.
I'd like you to play Peace Sells But Who's Buying by Megadeth. Not really the biggest Megadeth fan in the world, but I'm feeling it at the moment. I've had some nice emails from Mustaine lately. Who's a great guy. First bass thing I ever learned, I'm a bass player, the first thing I ever learned on the bass that was any good was the intro to Peace Sells. Still a great song after all these years. Still relevant given the political, changes we're going through at the moment. And I think it's time that we remembered what a great man Mustaine was on his peak form,
Sure. All right, the name
of choice?
Excellent choice. Well, the name of the book, again, is The Bloody Reign of Slayer by Joel McIver. Go pick it up today. And, well, here it is. This is Megadeth from the Peace Sells But Who's Buying release. This is the title track exclusively here
on your Classic Metal Show.
Thanks for checking out the best of the Classic Metal Show. You can tune into the Classic Metal Show live every Saturday night from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Eastern, exclusively at www.the